Helps if you remember to turn the sound on. Hey everybody, while I'm redesigning the background to this studio space, I know it may look boring, but hopefully this episode won't be boring, because this past week we had the Republican National Convention, where by now you know Donald Trump has accepted the nomination of the Republican Party to run for President of the United States, and as I mentioned last week, he picked Governor Mike Pence of Indiana to run as his vice presidential candidate. So I'm just going to do a quick rundown of the 4 days of the convention, and what it actually started with was the convention delegates voting on the platform, which is basically this mission statement for the Republican Party, and the Democrats will do it as well this coming week. And it goes point by point about what the party currently believes in, what they're pushing for, and really what their overall goal is. And I'll add a link down below in the description where you can actually read the entire party platform for yourself. Now, I'm not going to say whether this party platform is crazy or not crazy, you can decide for yourself. But these are just some of the highlights. The GOP has unanimously declared coal as an abundant, clean, affordable, reliable domestic energy resource. Clean. Even the Obama administration tried to push this idea of clean coal recently. I don't know about you, but coal mining never looked clean to me. And coal itself doesn't burn clean. But this particular plank of the platform just goes to show how deep the pockets of the coal industry is still and how much influence they have over the GOP. Moving on, there's actually one person on the Rules Committee who is openly gay, and they tried to put in just some language saying that they condemned the Orlando attack and that it was directed at the LGBT community. Now, the Republican Party has never been exactly welcoming to the LGBT community, and this hasn't stopped. They decided not to use that language, and instead they referred to the Orlando attack as a brutal assault on all human beings. Now, whether or not you believe that the attacker in that Orlando nightclub was being influenced by ISIS or influenced by his own closeted feelings towards the LGBT community, it absolutely was directed at the LGBT community, and not just all human beings. Moving on. The Republicans are declaring porn as a public health crisis. And the only reason I mention this is because they use the term pornography, but when you read the plank, what they're really going after is sexual predators on the internet, child pornography, and human trafficking. Now, to link pornography as a whole to those three things is patently ridiculous, but there you have it. Now, the party continues to support the dangerous and debunked idea of gay conversion therapy, and the language for this amendment was actually written by Tony Perkins, the head of the Family Research Council, who happens to also be a delegate from Louisiana. Coincidence? I think not. The GOP actually stands against early childhood education because they feel it gets in between the parents and the children at too early of a stage. Who wants their kids to be smarter? Now, since many Republicans in some deep red states have been trying to get the Bible taught in schools because they say we've taken God out of education, they realize they can't teach the Bible as truth. So what they're trying to do is get the Bible taught in schools as literature, because at least they could get all the kids to read it. And no one should ever say that the GOP gives up on a fight. They are still declaring their support for natural marriage instead of same-sex marriage, even though the Supreme Court has labeled same-sex marriage as being constitutional across the country. Now, in a little bit of a shout out to the Ammon Bundy Oregon Wildlife Refuge takeover, the GOP party platform suggests the indiscriminate and immediate disposal of all federal lands, and those should be given back to the states to do with what they please. And sort of right next to that, they also want to remove from the endangered species list the sage grouse, the prairie chicken, and the gray wolf. Now, that might seem really random, but my assumption is that has to do with certain types of development on lands that are currently protected because of those species. Now, going back for a second to the anti-gay feel for a lot of these party platform planks. Party platform planks, that's a fun one. Even the Log Cabin Republicans, which is actually a gay group of Republicans inside the party, says that this platform is the most anti-LGBT in the party's 162-year history. Now, there's something to be proud of. Now, that was an early part of the day of the first night, but let's now jump forward into the evening speakers, and let's go through just really quickly what they said. We'll go night by night. And actually, the first speaker I want to mention is the crowd itself and what they responded to. There was loud cheers when they found out that the latest cop in the Freddie Gray trial has been let free. Take that as you will, whether that's supporting the Blue Lives Matter idea or it's just the fact that they don't like seeing cops getting arrested for having a guy die in their custody. Normally when these conventions start, they actually do have someone of some religious background come in to offer a benediction, an opening prayer to the convention. For the Republicans, this was Pastor Mark Burns. Now, he's a member of what you call the prosperity movement inside the evangelical church. Basically, believe in God and you'll get rich. And while he gave a very excited opening benediction, he actually called on God to support the Republican Party and defeat the Democrats. This is not only highly unusual for anyone coming from a religious background speaking at one of these conventions, but it was highly offensive to most people in those positions. A number of priests and church elders and all sorts of folks from the religious community condemned Pastor Mark Burns for using God in that manner. One of the longer speeches of the night actually came from two men, Mark Geist and John Teagan. They were there during the Benghazi attack, and they recounted what they saw and what they did. And during their time on stage, they alluded to the mythical stand down order, which has been mentioned over and over again, and now it's been captured in the Michael Bay movie, but it really never happened, or at least there's been no evidence throughout all of the investigations, throughout all the committee hearings, there's been no evidence that there actually was a stand down order, meaning that people were at the ready and they were told to back off. There were certainly orders that happened that said, wait till we get more information. There were things telling people to go into a certain area, but not to just not go or to unready themselves. Moving on to Rudy Giuliani, he came off as incredibly unhinged in my opinion. He yelled through most of his speech, screaming about how he hated the fact that people were impugning the honor and maturity of Donald Trump because he knows him to be a good man, and also that everyone should be afraid because we're all going to die. And he was one of the many people who referred to Hillary Clinton as being supportive of open borders, that there would be just really no laws for immigration and that we would just be welcoming everyone in with open arms with no problem at all, which is patently untrue. Hillary has said time and time again that she supports what the Obama administration did with his executive orders, but those orders actually got blocked by the Supreme Court, so those are still in limbo. She also said that she wants to raise the number of Syrian refugees that we're bringing into the country to 65,000, but the actual amount of Syrian refugees that have actually come in is closer to like 3,000 at this point. And the idea that we can't screen them and we can't vet them has been proven over and over again to be false. There's an 18 to 24 month program that all of those refugees have to get in, and there actually has been reported to be a secret vetting program for anyone that seems to throw up red flags during that time period. Senator Sean Duffy, of Real World fame, repeated another talking point that Obama and Hillary combined have left us with $19 trillion in debt. Now, while that number is accurate, Obama can't be blamed for all 19 trillion. Half of that was there before he even came into office, and he came into office during the second worst recession in history. So the debt was bound to go up. But if you look at actually what Obama has done while in office, he has cut $1 trillion from the year-by-year deficit, more than any other president has cut in history. And also, the idea of blaming Hillary for the debt is kind of silly because as Secretary of State or even as Senator, she had very little control over the federal budget. It was also often repeated that violent crime has gone up during Obama's terms. Not so. Look here. The actual trend is downward. Then there was Antonio Sabato Jr., who came up and said, "We had a Muslim president for 7.5 years. He's Christian. Get over it." And then if there was one thing that you didn't want to do on the first night of the convention is cap it off with a scandal. And that's exactly what happened when Trump's wife Melania took the stage. She gave a speech which was a little bit, stiff, maybe? But I'm gonna give her credit because A, this is the first national speech she's ever given, and B, English is not her first language. I'll give her some slack for that. But what I'm not giving her slack for is what she said in the speech. It was proven very quickly, noticed by a random Twitter user, that portions of Melania's speech sounded exactly like Michelle Obama's speech from 2008, which ironically is the same type of position she's in, the wife of a person running for president. So a soon-to-be possible first lady giving her first national speech. Now, if I was thinking of writing a speech for that occasion, I might look to Michelle Obama, the most recent person in that position, but I wouldn't lift language directly from it, which is exactly what they did. So she was quickly accused of plagiarism, but most of the media backed off her and said they were accusing her speechwriter because they didn't believe that Melania actually wrote the speech herself. The Trump campaign originally tried to just deny that it happened at all, saying these were Melania's feelings. Paul Manafort, the campaign manager, director, whatever he's calling himself now, just said they were common words, and to think that Michelle Obama owns the English language is patently ridiculous, which so is that defense. But eventually the scriptwriter actually came out and admitted that it was her. She said she was on the phone with Melania, and Melania had referenced that speech. They talked about certain pieces that they liked, and the writer took those things down, noted them, but forgot to take them out of the speech and left them in. Again, I think that's probably pretty far-fetched, but that defense actually opens up a couple other problems because that writer actually works for the Trump organization. She actually sent her letter explaining this on Trump letterhead, not Trump campaign letterhead. Now, the Trump organization is not allowed to pay for resources for the campaign. So it opens up a problem there, and it also opens up the other problem, showing that Melania did know that language was there. There's no way that I would believe that she referenced those things, telling them to the writer, saying I want something like this, and not recognize those exact words when they were in the final speech. Then late in the evening, after Melania's speech, there was also Senator Joni Ernst, who came up with a number of veterans to the stage, and what she talked about was how afraid we should be because the FBI director has said that ISIS is here and that they're in all 50 states. Fact check. Not exactly what the director of the FBI said. James Comey actually said they have investigations of people in various states of radicalizing in all 50 states. That is a far cry from saying ISIS has people in every state. These are just people who could be in any position, whether it's the first time they've ever looked at an ISIS website or watched a video online, or maybe they're just mad. But I don't know about you, but I feel better knowing that the FBI is looking at people in all 50 states. So night 1 ends with a bit of a snafu, you might say, and we move on to night 2. Now, night 2 was mostly boring, but there was a couple things I want to mention. One being failed presidential candidate Ben Carson took the stage and used it to basically call Hillary Clinton a Satanist. The reason why is because Hillary Clinton wrote a thesis paper on a person named Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky is a writer, and he wrote a book called Rules for Radicals. And in that book, he offered an acknowledgement in the beginning to Lucifer by saying he was the first and ultimate radical. Is that really a link to Satanism? Meh. Not in my mind, and it scares me that the person who's a foremost neurosurgeon in the country actually believes this. Closing out the second night, there was also Donald Trump Jr.'s speech, which also cribbed notes from another writer. Now, before people start talking about this being plagiarism, the writer who he cribbed from, Frank H. Buckley, actually said he helped Donald Jr. write the speech. So you can't really plagiarize yourself, but a lot of other speechwriters out there said you would never actually take your own words, word for word, and put them in another speech, letting it sound like that person said it themselves. It's just not good practice. So night 3 comes along, and there's a few standout moments. Another pastor took the stage, this time Pastor Darrell Scott, and he said unemployment has actually gone up under Obama. Again, not true, it's an often repeated talking point, but this chart will show you what's actually been going on. A businessman friend of Donald Trump actually took the stage, a guy named Phil Ruffin, and not only did he talk specifically about a deal that he worked with Trump as an example of how great of a negotiator he is, that specific deal was investigated and found out that Trump took a huge loss on that deal, probably not the one you want to bring up. But he also said that one of the reasons why he's supporting Trump is because when you take our situation with our national debt, and you might say we don't pay our bills, he says Trump always pays his bills on time. That's an odd stance to take when Trump has been sued at least 60 times by employees and contractors, and right now there's at least 253 subcontractors from the Taj Mahal casino that are also in a legal tangle with him about paying his bills. Now, I don't know about you, but I find it just really odd when people make such easy trip-ups. If you know somebody's got that kind of background in any sort of manner, I just wouldn't even allude to it. But there you go. So on night 3, also vice presidential pick Mike Pence finally gets to take the stage, and he delivers what is a really great speech, actually. A lot of people were responding saying that they thought he should have been the one running for president because he actually sounded like a presidential candidate. And actually, a lot of fact checkers looked into what he said, and most of the things he said were true, which is again a rarity for both parties at these conventions. But one of the things he mentioned was that Hillary's budget would actually be far worse for the economy and add to the debt than Trump's budget, which has been proven to be demonstrably false. Trump's budget is incredibly dangerous for the country. According to experts, Hillary's budget would actually only add add $250 million to the budget over 10 years, which is incredibly little, whereas Trump's planned budget would add $11.5 trillion. That's bad. Also, before we get to the big news of night 3, I also want to mention that on the same day, there was an interview with the New York Times that came out with Trump, where he said that if elected president, he would consider tearing up all the agreements between the US and other countries, possibly pulling the US out of NATO, and forcing other countries, smaller ones, to pay up before the US would defend them. Now, Trump goes on to explain that this is because he feels the US has been far too long used by the rest of the world as its cop and its defender, while we're the ones paying for that out of taxes and our budget. But still, when he was given the direct example about what would he do if Russia made a move on some of the smaller countries in the Eastern Bloc, he was like, I'd have to look at it. That's not exactly a huge boon of confidence to our allies across the world. Now, Paul Manafort, again, his campaign director, strongly denied that this actually ever happened and said that those quotes were taken either out of context or were completely inaccurate. But the transcript of the interview was posted and they are entirely accurate. So, facts are fun. But obviously the big news of night 3 was Ted Cruz took the stage, and I don't know exactly why they even gave him the floor. Maybe it was because they thought this was going to be some sort of unity event, but Ted Cruz had been projecting up to this point that he was never, ever going to endorse Donald Trump. I mean, why would he? The guy said his wife was ugly and his dad possibly killed JFK. So Cruz does take the stage, and he does exactly what he said. He doesn't endorse Donald Trump, and when the crowd realizes he's not going to, and then he says the words, "vote your conscience," which is exactly what the delegates were saying, the ones that wanted to be unbound from being forced to vote for Trump. The crowd started to boo him, and they basically booed him off stage. I mean, albeit he was finished with his speech, but yeah. He walked out to the loud chorus of boos, which is exactly what Ted Cruz wants. This is the kind of publicity he likes. He's gonna say he won the night because he stuck to his principles. The next day, he actually said that he wasn't going to do exactly what Trump wanted and follow him around like a servile little puppy. But this also goes to show exactly why Ted Cruz is hated so much in the Senate, because he just doesn't play with others well. But that booing also got so serious that Heidi Cruz had to be escorted out by security because she was being taunted by the Trump fans on her way out the door. So that's friendly. So on the final night, of course, it is Trump's night. It is his big speech. Ivanka Trump also spoke, talking about millennials and women vote, which she's trying really hard to bring into the Trump campaign. But the night was all about Trump and his big speech. Now, the speech itself had been leaked to the media earlier that day, so it wasn't exactly a big surprise, and he stuck mostly to the script. But that being said, it also gave the media and fact checkers a long time before the speech to actually double check the things that he said. I'll put a link down below to a larger fact check, and some of the things he said were right on and some of the things he said were false. But here are some of those. He said the US was the highest taxed nation in the world. Not so. It's near the bottom or middle of the pack, but he might have been referring to only the corporate tax, which it is second only to Japan. But that being said, most corporations do not pay anywhere near the actual corporate tax rate. They get loopholes, they put their stuff in offshore Cayman accounts. To even believe that any corporation actually pays that is ridiculous. He said Iran is on the path to nuclear weapons. Not so. The Iran deal is actually doing exactly what it said. They're losing centrifuges, they're getting rid of all their enriched uranium, and they're actually even pouring cement into their reactors. As I said earlier in the video, Trump mentions the fact that the murder rate has gone up under Obama, and it actually has done that, but only in the top 50 cities. As a nation, it has gone down. He also said police shootings are going up, but that's not true either. This chart will show you they're actually going down. Now, Paul Manafort, again, campaign director extraordinaire, says this data, which comes from the FBI, he doesn't believe it, because why would you believe the FBI? Now, some people were saying that this was actually a really good speech for Trump because he stayed on message and he sounded somewhat more presidential than usual, but of course the very next day he got unhinged again, went way off script, and spent the whole time going back to earlier arguments about Cruz and saying that I didn't say his dad actually was connected to the JFK assassination, but you know, I mean, other people have said that, and there are photos of his dad with Lee Harvey Oswald. So, you know, I'm not saying he did it, but photos don't lie. And then he also said that he thought that the publication where he's seen those photos should have gotten a Pulitzer, and that was the National Enquirer. Not exactly the basis for anything. And if that doesn't give you enough confidence in where Trump gets his information and who his fans are, this might. David Duke, famed past Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, tweeted out that he thought that Trump's speech was fantastic and he couldn't have said it better himself. Then, if that wasn't enough, he was so excited about the fact that Trump was doing so well in the campaign and that his message was so close to his own, he's decided to run for Senate again. He's hoping that this xenophobic, racist anger that has come up under the Trump campaign will fuel his own run for Senate, so he can fight for the European American rights. Nothing like a good old Klansman in the Senate. So that's the rundown of the Republican National Convention that happened last week. If you think I missed anything or you want to talk about other parts of that convention, go ahead and leave me a note in the comments down below. I'll also be doing a video like this for the Democratic National Convention, which starts on Monday. So that's all for this week. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you can do so in the link down below or at the button at the end of the video. You can also like, favorite, or share this video with anyone you think might want to take part in a political discussion, a reasonable one, in the comments. Thanks for watching, stay tuned for next week, and as always, stay safe. Hello? Can I have the baby already? It's baby! Say hi!
He's full of boogers.